to be ready, that when Christ returns, we may open up to Him immediately. And it's a sad state of affair because most Christians around the world have no clue about what the kind of information I'm sharing with you today because they are afraid to study Bible prophecy. There's this one book here that was written by this guy named Robert Conklin. It's called The European Union and the Super Religion. Let me read to you what he has to say about this. The Bible indicates that true believers of the church age will be removed prior to the curtain's rise on this final act. 1 Thessalonians 5:9. Therefore, one must decide how he or she will live in these last days. To sit idly by, ignoring the urgency of the hour and the spiritual significance it holds in individual lives, would be folly indeed. This urgency demands that earnest believers understand the biblical foundation of God's plan for the ages. Church and Bible study leaders throughout the world must teach this foundational material along with current events. No subject is more relevant or important in the lives of people, for it offers purpose, meaning, direction, and hope to a lost and perishing world. And to that I say, amen. He goes on to say, the recognition that Jesus Christ could come at any moment for all true believers should transform an empty, self-centered, and materialistic Christianity into a vibrant, solid Christianity that proclaims purposeful and holy living. Instead of wasted time and useless activity, Christians would evaluate daily pursuits from an eternal perspective. God recognizes that not all Christians will understand the impact of the doctrine of Christ's return to His earthly kingdom. Just as only a few were looking for His first advent, so too only a relatively few small minority will be looking for His second. As in Colossians 3, the Apostle Paul tells us in Colossians 3 that we should be setting our minds on things above, not on things of this world. And we should be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Well, one more thing that Dr. Charles Stanley had said in his devotional. He says, the Father wants us excited and hopeful about Christ's return because the event is a culmination of His plan for the world. He stresses Christ's second coming in order to help us think about our life in timeless terms. Realizing that Jesus could return at any time keeps the church's focus right. Let me repeat that. Realizing that Jesus could return at any time keeps the church's focus right. Now, and that's why I sat down with JD and had lunch with him several weeks ago. And I just praised the Lord because I could find for once, I found somebody on the same thinking level. Yeah. And JD and I and this other guy, David Blevins from One Love Ministries, we sat there talking about Christ's second coming for hours. We went in there for breakfast and we came out there for lunch. And it's such a blessing to share with people who are excited about Christ's second coming. Now, when you share with your friends, you might not have the same kind of zeal or excitement that you might feel because JD has that zeal and fervor about this whole thing about Christ's second coming. Because people, they're either too comfortable or they're too carnal to really appreciate messages on the second coming of Christ. And I believe when you're talking about Christ's return, it's a true litmus test of where your heart is. Because there was this one message by this evangelist. His name was Barry Smith a number of years ago. He's from New Zealand. And Barry Smith was sharing that he asked this one guy, are you coming to my teaching tonight on end times prophecy? And the guy said, No, when Jesus comes, he comes. It's nothing to get excited about. And Barry Smith said, it's funny that we put Jesus in that light. When Christ returns, he returns. When he comes, he comes. Now, if Christ is the bridegroom and we, the church, are his bride, can you imagine for young women out there and a young man, and you're engaged to be married, and when your groom-to-be goes off to Iraq or Afghanistan, and you're looking for his return, but you say, when he comes, he comes. How does that make your groom feel? When he comes, he comes. No big thing. You want to be with the one you love. And when he's away, you miss him. You miss him. And that should spur your heart to get yourself ready for Christ's return. Now, this whole problem of identification, let me get back on that. There is so much fake identification out there. There's ID theft. Now, when 9/11 occurred, remember that all of the hijackers, these terrorists, came in with fake IDs. And a lot of these illegal Mexican immigrants coming to the United States, all they do is they go to California or across the border, and they can purchase these IDs, fake IDs, really cheap. Applied Digital Solutions, they now have a microchip that can be implanted in humans. And in 1996, I gave another class on this new identification, implantable microchips. And I remember people laughing at me about this. What are you talking about microchips being implanted in humans? Now, Applied Digital Solutions have already implanted at least 160 implants into these Alzheimer's patients. And Mexican officials have all of these implants in them. And this last news release that came out a few months ago, there's at least 7,000 people worldwide walking around with microchip implants in them. And they plan to push this. On CNBC, there was a news segment right up here actually showing people getting implanted in the right arm with this microchip. And I videotaped this one segment on CNBC where these office workers would be scanned and they could go into these secured areas with this implantable microchip. So it's actually here. The technology is here. And so it's a combination of going towards a cashless society and a new identification system. Now, this cashless society, they have a pilot program in Spain where these people actually can debit their bank accounts with this microchip already in them. And a lot of prophecy teachers were speaking about this back in the 1990s, that this would happen. But it's happening today. So if we have the technology here today, how much closer are we towards the rapture of the church? If we see the signs of Ezekiel 38 taking place, how much closer are we to the rapture of the church? Now, these slides up here, ready to rebuild, I mentioned that they already have plans to rebuild the temple. And I have this videotape about rebuilding the temple by Thomas Ice and Randall Price. And I usually show it to my Bible study groups because it actually shows the cornerstone and all of the plans and implementations, the architect plans, the engineering plans to go ahead and rebuild this temple. So there is 7 signs in the tribulation period that are occurring today, and that shows us how close we are to the rapture of the church. Another sign is Europe, the rise of Europe. Now, we can see that in 1981, I remember reading the newspaper, Greece becomes the 10th nation. You know, for those students of Bible prophecy, Daniel 2 and Daniel chapter 7 talks about this revived Roman Empire, that there will be a 10-nation confederacy that will rise out of Europe. In 1981, when I read the headlines that came out in the newspaper that Greece became the 10th nation, wow, I had just chicken skin. I said, wow, this is actually happening in my lifetime.